The following contains references to addiction, dismemberment, and death. Tobacco is a known carcinogen, and you should never use it. Listener discretion is advised. Vaporized. The dusk of man. Addiction. The fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. Used in a sentence, he committed the theft to finance his drug addiction. We humans have the unique proclivity to addiction. Sure, there are some animals who imbibe, like elephants with fermented fruit, wallabies with poppies, or monkeys drinking left-behind cocktails at resorts. Hell, even cats with catnip, I suppose. But Homo sapiens really have cornered addiction, and we have totally perfected it. We've had some real superstars throughout our history: heroin, coke, alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, digital distraction. You know, the list goes on and on. But there was nothing really new for us to destroy our lives and that of our families for the last 200,000 or so odd years we've been kicking around. Well, addicts, that all changed in 2027. The vape company Cool Port Miss Vapes LLC came out with such an addictive product that eventually everyone became hooked. Hell, you didn't even have to be a sucker, one who inhales the stuff. If you were around someone who sucked and got a whiff, you wanted it. And in the end, you'd be a sucker as well. This stuff didn't care about age, race, color, political leanings, or anything. It went right for the pleasure center in the hippocampus, and all your troubles went away. Of course, it came with a giant price tag. Your life. How, after thousands of years, did Cool Port Miss find a substance that everyone on the planet craved? Not just a few, but all. The theory is that while attempting to prolong the shelf life of their product line, they started to add the chemical D10, I16, E5, or what the company called replenish. It pretty much gave all their products an infinite half-life. In other words, they lasted forever. It had a side effect no one knew about: serious addiction. Replenish came out of a single quarry in Canada, not too far from the famous now-defunct asbestos quarries. Cool Port Miss Vapes sales doubled, tripled, and quadrupled, growing at the fastest rate of any company in history. Health officials, doctors, concerned moms, and many other groups tried to stop the spread of this monster. But in the end, they became suckers as well. People didn't even try to wean themselves off the mists. They just kept on sucking until they could suck no more, and then sucked the very life out of themselves. Pretty soon, the wheels of society started to come off. No one went to work, ate out, exercised, or did anything normal except sucking, or thinking about sucking. Replenish was having its day with the human race, all right. The world's population was being wiped out by this product that, by the way, came in Banana Blast, Big Berry, Mega Mint, and Espresso Delight. Delicious. The real problem for the mists and for the world was that the Replenish mine in Canada was a singularity with no other known source. And one day, that mine ran dry. What now? One sucker who worked for the Mists was a 50-something red-haired freckled ginger named Mark. Mark thought he might have a solution of sorts. Mark's wife Susan of 27 years had just passed away, of course, from an overdose of Replenish, just like how everyone else was dying. Mark noted all of Coolport's victims who passed away all had incredibly large volumes of Replenish remaining in their bodies, as it was a preservative after all. If we can't get Replenish from the mine, why can't we recycle it from the people who don't need it any longer? So, he began to experiment. He took Susan apart in his basement and extracted all the Replenish he could from her organs. It was a truly gruesome task, made all the more easier with steady hits of Mega Mint delivered from his Coolport Mist Pocket Pal, one of the many fun delivery systems the Mists offered to its suckers. Mark found that the extraction process involved, first, organ removal, then pureeing the organs into a lovely human bisque. When the correct consistency was finally achieved, then, and only then, please don't skimp on the puree. If you do, you will not achieve the full bounty of your efforts. Pour the entire affair through a fine mesh sieve, and then on to the distillation process. The correct temperature of the first distillation being 322 degrees Fahrenheit, with subsequent distillations leaning towards the cooler side. Mark took great notes. It's all there for any science geeks if they wanted to try it. Anyhow, he ended up with a tidy little pile of Replenish, thanks to Susan and his PhD in chemistry. He shared his discovery with the company, and they were back in business. The bodies of the deceased had plenty of Replenish in them. After all, the compound had an infinite half-life, and it didn't care what medium it was, rock or flesh or whatever. The CEO, Sir Walter Hedgeworth, a large Santa Claus-looking man whose vape delivery system of choice was an old pipe any grandfather from 1956 might have used, stated in a company-wide address. Corpses started to mysteriously disappear from graveyards and morgues. About the same time, Coolport Mist Vapes LLC got into the mortuary and funeral home business. Hell, in the end, Coolport didn't even try to hide what they were doing when they introduced a special new flavor, Menthol Man.
Now made with real man. Coolport Mists.
No one really cared as long as they got their fix. And other strange things started to happen. People with missing fingers, limbs, and such began to appear more and more. The world started to look like old pictures of Civil War veterans with missing limbs. Yes, people were selling their appendages or vaping their own body parts. The solution worked for a few years. The problem was that it was a simple case of diminishing returns. The Replenish from the corpses was not as potent as from the original mine source. As a result, supply could not keep up with demand. The world became an even darker place. where the rule of law no longer existed. The strong prevailed over the weak. Small armies of heavily armed gangs began roaming the streets, looking for people to distill for the replenish that was inside of them. In this post-apocalyptic world, people began dying even faster due to violence, faster than even the mists could have killed them. No place was safe. Groups of families and those that could not defend themselves banded together and built isolated fortresses in the wilderness, always hoping that they would not be discovered by the Zunks or the Mofos, two of the largest gangs destroying the world and themselves. These gangs were made up mostly of former military, soldiers of fortune, and right-wing extremists. They also had access to many of their nation's weapons and tactics. The Zunks were from the communist bloc countries, and the Mofos from the Western countries. Of course, violence and death was pretty rampant in these family outposts as well, but not the total obliteration that would certainly be their fate if discovered by the gangs. Life in these outposts was a hand-to-mouth existence. They grew food and hunted to survive. The smarter pioneers, as they called themselves, usually built their outposts by a good water source. The electric grid was long ago smashed, but some of the more advanced pioneers did have solar power. Camouflage was of the utmost importance, as to not be spotted by the gang's drones.
612, Alpha. Pioneers in the tree line. Fire.
Outside of their forest compounds, they communicated with bird calls when they dared to go out. Most resorted to candlelight. You could say it was the Dark Ages. I would call it the Pitch Black Ages. Sadly, all of these outposts were eventually overrun by the gangs. In the end, the Zunks and the Mofos ended up in an all-out war with each other. The Mofos triumphed, but they began infighting with themselves over the replenish they ripped from the human race, and began to kill each other. If you could have had a seat on the International Space Station and watched the Earth during those pitch black ages, you would have seen all the city lights go out. You would see much smaller, dimmer lights pop up scattered over the face of the planet. If you had the patience, you would see these lights eventually extinguish, one by one. Yes, this was the fate of humans, and we did it all by ourselves. No asteroid, flood, virus, or global warming. Nope, the hand of doom was our own hand. If you left the space station and came back to Earth at the dusk of man, this is what the very end looked like. The world continued to distill and suck itself to death. Until one day, there was only a single soul left on the entire planet. Sir Walter Hedgeworth, the CEO of Coolport Miss LLC, had the largest supply of replenish, so he held out the longest. Until the day in a delusional replenish stupor, knowing his stash was almost spent, and having removed an arm and a leg already, he decided his head would hold a bounty of the stuff. Obviously, he wasn't really thinking with his head at all, and perished in his homemade guillotine. Maybe Replenish and the Earth had had enough of people and their destructive ways. Who knows? But I do know one thing, and that is that sucking on vapes sucks. Until next time, addicts.
Thanks for listening to Hothead Horrors. I release a new tale once a month. Please like and subscribe to keep the horror coming. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.